So, let's try this again. So I tried this earlier and I goosed, so it didn't work. So, today we are reading a book called Recipes of Life from Free Poker by Jay Jeggerson and Matt Goodwin. And no, this one doesn't have chapters per se. It does, but it doesn't. I'll show you when I get to it what the different chapters look like. There is nothing more expensive than free. Free bar poker is no exception. Attributed to an old Japanese proverb, it means that when you accept something for free, you might be asked to do something or pay something for something else in return, so that you might end up having to spend more than what you thought you had gained. And I'm just showing you. So that's, where is it? So this is the Japanese proverb right here. I can't pronounce it, so I'm not going to try to. Okay. Forward from the authors. In this book, you will find the adventures that started our friendship. These adventures helped our friendship evolve into what it is today. Jay and I met at a poker table, surprisingly. Surprising? Not really. With our love for the game, we grew up in a different world than Texas Hold'em. We cut our teeth on 5-card draw, 5-card stud, 7-card stud, and the like. It's funny, but I remember an old friend of mine telling me an old saying. He said, people come into our lives on a thread. It's a fine thread, to be sure. Some will come for a reason to teach us something we need to know. If we listen, some are here for a season of our lives, like when you're on an adventure, a new adventure, and you will find someone to adventure with. Or there are those who come into our lives for a lifetime of friendship and mentorship and make life worth living. Our thread is poker, specifically Texas Hold'em. Jay's a great friend who's come for a lifetime. He's a great friend, an honorable man, and has a family that's amazing. I'd say he's humble about it, but he isn't. He's proud of his wife and his family, and it shows. It's one of his many traits that I admire. When he mentioned writing a book about the adventures we have shared due to playing poker, I was all in. What you didn't expect, a poker reference. See the primer below for reference. The idea is great, and Jay is a storyteller extraordinaire. Me, I'm just the color guy for the book. Bold move, Cotton, to quote a movie I know. Our lives were very different growing up. Jay has lived in Colorado a long time, but did not grow up here. Me, I am a Colorado native, a salesman and a Navy guy, brought together by an amazing game played the world over. People come from all over to play at a table, to see what they can do, prove their worth, if you will. It looks like an easy time sitting there, betting or folding, but to those who play, it's a battlefield. There are so many nuances to poker, any type of poker. With Hold'em, there are more. The tells of the players, their attitude toward the other players, the position. Wait, that's like any other poker game, right? It is, and it isn't. Jay and I like the isn't part the best. The story of our bonding is in the book, and our friendship has some fiction parts are embellished, and some of the characters are based on people that we have seen our whole lives. Playing poker, not just the ones we saw worth while playing Texas Hold'em. It was our privilege to know some of the people we met, while others, well, you can read about them. It's a story of fun, friendship, and some interesting things that happened in life, and how it's dealt with. Another poker reference. Life in the game of poker is, after all, what you make it. Enjoy, Matt. As Matt said, I suggested we write a fictional account of our adventures on and off the felt. I can also make poker references. As we were having a great time writing, remembering the early days of our poker playing, and making up stories, we realized it was better to have a trilogy. The one you are about to read is about our adventures with free poker, the second with tournament poker, and the last edition brings you our foray into high-stakes poker. Part of our poker journey has included meals that we have enjoyed celebrating after one of us won money or would win a food voucher for a couple of meals at a bar. We also had some great and not so great meals at the home cash games we played. As we started writing the book, we realized how much our per and post meals were part of the whole experience. So we changed the title of the book to include the word recipe and included a few real recipes throughout the book. The characters in the book are fictional, based on literally hundreds of people that we have sat across from at a poker table. The same type of people can be found around the country at free bar Texas Hold'em tournaments from Seattle to Maine, everywhere in between. This book was written for the sole purpose of entertainment. As you tag along with Chief and Big Slick and their misadventures, we hope you enjoy reading the book as much as we enjoyed writing it. J. Primer. Jay and I have lived in the poker world, as I'll call it, for a long time. We know some people may have ventured into this world, and there are those that have never been to poker world. To help you come along on our adventure, we want to let you in on the lingo of the game. Now, I'm pausing here for a second. Some of these words I might mispronounce. I'm sorry if I get them wrong. Yeah, sometimes me and names don't get along so well. All right, here we go. Cards. The cards go from ace to king, J jack, Q queen, K king, A ace. KK, a pair of kings face cards, Jack queen king. Poker terms. Antes. An ante is a small set amount which all players must contribute before any cards are dealt. Blinds. Similar to an ante, but not everyone has to contribute. There are two blinds, the small and the big. The small blind is placed by the player directly to the left of the dealer, dealer button, with the big blind to the left of the small. Blinds are typically set for a cash game from $1 to $2. For a tournament, the blinds typically start at $1 or $2 again, but after a set amount of time, they increase. The time is determined by the type of tournament. Blinds can increase anywhere from 15 minutes to every 2 hours. The board, the table. Check, no bet made. Bet on the hand you have. Burn, take a card off the deck and put it in a discard pile without anyone seeing it. All in all, when a player bets their entire stack of chips on their current hand. Big Slick. This is a suited AK, such as the AK of hearts. Muck or mucking. This is just another term for folding. Rick. The percentage of the pot that the casino takes each hand. Bad bet. When you have a good hand, but you're still beat by a better hand. Family pot. When everyone at the table is in the pot, no one folds. This is fewer hands than you would think. Texas Hold'em. Terms. Hole cards. The cards the player is dealt. The next 4 terms describe the shared cards in the hand. Flop. The first 3 cards played on the board. The turn. The 4th card on the board. The river, also known as 5th Street, is the last card to be dealt on the board. The next section describes the flow or play for the hand. Texas Hold'em, the play of the hand. The sequence of the game flows like this. Blinds are put in and the dealer deals the 2 hole cards to every player. These are your hole cards and are only for you to use/see. You will share the rest of the cards with everyone. Your goal is to make the best hand you can using 5 or the 7 cards. After the whole cards are dealt, you can check, bet, or call according to the whole cards. Once everyone has had a chance to check, bet, call, or fold, the dealer will burn the top card of the deck and deal the flop. Players have another opportunity to check, bet, call, or fold before the dealer will burn the top card again and deal the turn. This sequence is followed one last time for the river card, also known as 5th Street. After the final round of check, bet, call, or fold, the hand is over. The last term we'll describe is known as tilt or being on tilt. Tilt, just like it implies, is when the player loses their mind and starts playing with their emotions. It doesn't usually end well. Now, on to the book. Excuse me 1 minute. Blink. Blink. Ah. Alrighty. I looked at the clock on the nightstand, 6:20 a.m. Oh, so here's how the chapters start. Yeah, it doesn't say chapter, but here we go. I looked at the clock on the nightstand, 6:20 a.m. It's early Saturday morning. However, I have Texas Hold'em on the brain. It was one of those needs you just have to do something about, and I needed to play some cards. I knew trying to go back to sleep was futile. Big Slick is generally an early riser, so I thought I would send a text and see if I would get a response. Text. Slip on some clothes, pull the hair into a ponytail, and let's play a cash game before the 10 a.m. tournament starts. It didn't take more than a couple minutes before I received one back. See you in 15. Right on time, 15 minutes later, Big Slick rolls up and I jump in the passenger seat. How did you know I would be up? I looked at him, smiled, and said, I didn't. It was just a hunch. I asked him what his wife said, and Big Slick said they didn't have any plans. So we quietly rolled out of bed. He found jeans in the dark, threw on a short-sleeve button-down shirt, put on deodorant, and splashed some water on his face. Before putting a hairband around his ponytail, left a note that said, be home by 2 p.m. We zipped into the Dunkin' Donuts drive-thru and got 2 large black coffees, and were ready to make the 45-minute trip up the mountain. Big Slick had a playlist in his Spotify library named Hold'em Songs. Thankfully, he didn't play it very often when I was in the car. However, he insisted on it that morning. It included Kenny Rogers' song The Gambler, Poker Face with Lady Gaga, Viva Las Vegas with Elvis, Ace of Spades with Motorhead, just to name a few. He was singing Ace of Spades and took the sharp turn off E470 onto the I-70 ramp. A bit too fast, but I didn't care. He was in the mood and we were going up the hill to play cards. On an early Saturday morning in the fall, Interstate 70 was 3 lanes of empty bliss, with the snow-capped Rockies in front of us. Big Slick made great time as we shot up the Central City Parkway toward Blackhawk. I looked out the passenger side as we made the steep incline up the mountains, and Big Slick was singing loudly with the king, Viva Las Vegas. His excitement was contagious. Exactly 2 cars were on the 8.4-mile stretch of the Central City Parkway, and Big Slick passed them while he was shaking his right hand like the king did when he was singing. Most gamblers that take the Parkway drive up right past Central City and continue the last mile south to Blackhawk. The town of Central City had built a highway with an exit right off Interstate 70. That was completed in 2004. About the same time the Parkway was being built, Blackhawk decided to bring in big casinos with big hotels, essentially winning the first between the two cities on who was going to be the dominant gambling town. I don't think Blackhawk ever sent Central City a thank you card for building them a highway to their town. When we got to the casino, the poker room was really quiet, except for a table with six locals in the corner of the room playing a 2-4 blind cash game. They looked like a bunch of zombies. We walked along and got to the railing and were checking things out. The railing is the observation point for the game floor. You are not allowed to cross the floor unless you are a player. These players were beaten and looked like they had just run a marathon. Zeroing in on the conversation, we heard comments about playing all night and being at the same table since the afternoon before. A couple of players had watered-down drinks in front of them from the wee hours of the morning. I asked the host if there was room to play at the table, and boom, Big Slick and I were playing Hold'em with the living dead. It doesn't matter how good you aren't as sharp after being up for 30 hours. It doesn't matter if you are the legendary Jackie Chan, you just aren't the same at the table. You can miss the smallest things like a tail or a bluff, and that can make all the difference in playing Hold'em. While we were taking advantage of the players because we knew that they were not sharp, I don't know. You can take this dilemma to your high school ethics teacher. We settled in at the table, and the locals barely acknowledged that we were there. Making friends was not the objective. It was winning money. However, it was Indication the locals didn't really care for us crashing their table. They all knew each other and they were likely thinking they were going to take money from these two new guys. As Mike said in the movie Rounders, they were not playing together. However, piranhas don't eat each other. It was clear that these players knew each other, played all too well. These all-nighters were playing against two wide-awake players that had just finished a large Dunkin' Donuts black coffee and were ready to win. As we walked to the table, Big Slick said to me, "No hands for 30 minutes, and this time I mean it." On the way up to Black Hawk, we discussed that we would not play any hands unless we had pocket KK aces or Big Slick. We would take time to read the table and figure out everyone's tells and tendencies. I was always the one that could not help myself and would crack and start playing, just like usual. I was ready to play some hands, but 30 minutes was the agreement and I was determined to stick to it. The rationale for this decision is that in a casino game, although unlike a home game, you can get up and walk away from the casino table at any time you want. However, winning a big hand early and then immediately cashing out is frowned at and is bad karma. Maybe if you are in Vegas and don't plan on being there again for years, you can walk away. Maybe. But walking away like that is still a bad look and bad karma. Even though coffee was pumping through my veins and I knew I could win hands, immediately I told myself to focus. We both stuck with the plan and were making hand after hand while observing. Then the locals started talking about the 10 a.m. sunrise tournament, and they wanted this cash game to be done around 9:30. That would give them time to get coffee and check in. Big Slick and I made eye contact. They were planning on playing in the 10 a.m. tournament. This was like the movie. They shoot horses, don't they? Each of them was just trying to be the last person standing. Big Slick always said, "Not my circus, not my monkeys." But it was hard not to suggest to these people that they needed to go to bed, not play in a tournament. The first part of our agreement was not to play for 30 minutes. The second part was to make enough to pay the $60 entry fee for the 10 a.m. tournament. It did not take long for us to realize that the players around the table really were on sleep-deprived autopilot. They were slow to respond and were making calls that any decent player wouldn't make. We noticed some, since they were all zombie-like and knew each other, they were just trading money back and forth. The only one making money was the casino with their rake. It was nearly impossible for us to keep to our original plan of not playing any hands and just learned the players with their tells and tendencies. I wanted to bust up this table. Once the self-torture of the 30 minutes had finally passed, it was time to make hay. These blurry-eyed opponents didn't have a chance against an average player, but we were no longer average players. After we started engaging in the game, we were challenged by a couple of the better players at the table and easily won a couple of decent pots. They tried to get aggressive with us and would overbet the pot. We were past the $60 buy-in for the 10 a.m. tournament and feeling good about the situation. Since we were up enough to play for our buy-in, Big Slick casually asked if I wanted to get some coffee before the 10 a.m. start. We had slowly changed our minds about trying to take as much money as we could off these players and were trying to make a graceful exit. The player on my right said, "Are you too afraid to play with this group? Are we too good for you?" That was the wrong thing to say to Big Slick. He looked at me and said, "We need to stay a little longer." Big Slick said it in his calm, low voice, and I knew he was going to open up a can of whoop-ass on the table. It didn't take long on the second hand after he said we were going to stay for a while. Big Slick got an ace-high flush, also known as the nut flush, on the flop. My Mr. Granny Pants had a king-high flush and wasn't paying attention to the board. He went all in, and Big Slick Snap called him. I am not exactly sure what a competent fit looks like, but I am pretty sure this guy had won when Big Slick flipped over his ace. He fumbled around his shirt and then his pants and dug into his pockets and pulled out a wad of cash and demanded more chips. The entire time he was looking for money, He was snorting like a charging bull at Panada. Meanwhile, Big Slick calmly stacked his winnings. The guy was now on full tilt and was unabashed angry. Tried to take me and Big Slick down to try and get his money back. Exhausted, revengeful, and playing on tilt never works out well for anyone. He was no exception. Big Slick and I continued to chop up the table and were wringing hands from everyone. After getting tired of Big Slick and I playing it cool and winning huge pots, the table decided to break up and get ready for the start for the sunrise game. The Phil Haymath wannabe abruptly left the table and announced to no one in particular that he was going to get his money back by winning the tournament. What he needed to do was go to bed. Big Slick said, "I'm done. It won't get any better than that," and I agreed. We went to the cage, withdrew to cash out. Big Slick and I had made over $1,000 between us, and we were walking back to his car. Big Slick told me that he was going to lay the $100 bill across his hood and send a picture to his wife, asking her where she wanted to go for dinner. Big Slick said she is going to pick Shannon's. He suggested I do the same. I told him that my girlfriend would probably be happy with an In-N-Out double animal style with fries and a strawberry shake. I looked at Big Slick and asked, "Did you ever think we could get to the point where we would play for 90 minutes and win $1,000? He smirked. "Yeah, I did, and we were just getting started." Eep. Okay. So that was the end of that chapter. So now we start the other chapter. The next chapter. It was a dark and stormy night. Wait, that's been done. Let me try again. When we first met, Big Slick and I had been playing Trevi's house game for a few months with mostly regular players. I was there more than Slick was at first, even though we lived across the street, because Trevi's fiancée, Amy, always made sure I was invited. I guess she thought I would be a good influence on him, but the invitations did lead to much speculation about my relationship with her. Occasionally other players would show up, usually invited by Amy. She would invite her friends or ex-boyfriends and some questionable characters, but it was most often just the five of us. We all talked, but it was mostly game talk. At least at the beginning of the game we would talk. To give you an idea of what happened at these games, let me summarize the characters of those involved. Trevi. Trevi would never stop talking ever. He was one of those guys who knew everything. Just ask and he would spend an hour telling you. Not in a mean way, but an arrogant way. He just thought he was right. He was the only man I've ever seen get a stripper to put her hand on his mouth because she was tired of him talking. Mike. Mike was the high school jock of the game, loud, outspoken, and usually arguing with Trevi. Just to argue, he would wrestle anyone for anything and was willing to put his money where his mouth was for a bet. He was very strong, and after a few beers he could bench press a Buick. Taylor. Taylor was the timid one of us, a soft-spoken guy who got even more soft-spoken when drinking. You already know Big Slick and I, although at that point Big Slick and I knew each other by sight, sized each other up at the table, but we hadn't really started a friendship yet. The games were fun, but usually devolved into a talking/shouting match between Mike and Trevi. It did not matter what the topic was, an argument was waiting to happen. Taylor, on the other hand, was more of the laid-back, not going to drink too much kind of guy, but was there to get away from his wife most nights. Big Slick and I were just having fun and a few drinks, most of the time there to wait until the time was right to relieve the others of their money. It didn't always work like that, but it often did, and regardless, we had fun. When the game started heading toward high school behavior, Big Slick and I would usually either disappear or just hang in the background and see what happened. Sometimes the game would start back up and we would finish playing. Sort of. There was no final table, but there was always a winner. Such was the game at Trevi's. The night Big Slick and I went from acquaintances who occasionally saw each other at poker games and became friends is one for the books, or this book at least. That infamous night we were playing across the street from Trevi's at Mike's place. Since his wife was out of town to celebrate, Mike had brought in some edible cookies. These were the first marijuana-laced cookies anyone had tried in the group. We were about 2 hours into the game, so a few drinks in. Being the experienced one, Trevi was the first to ante up for a taste of the forbidden sweets. We were sure to mention it was a great improvement from the nutty ice beer he coveted. If you haven't tried natural ice, don't. Seriously, just don't. The bag of cookies was opened and Trevi took half, then Mike had the other half of a cookie. With a prompting, Taylor had half of another. Big Slick and I weren't into this, so we just watched as the comedy started to unfold. We kept playing cards, and about 3 hands later, Trevi looked up and said, "Mike, are you sure these are the special cookies? I don't feel anything." Taylor piped in saying the same, and Mike indignantly assured us they were indeed special. It was decided by the 3 of them that maybe a half wasn't enough. None of them were familiar with edibles or how they worked, so the bag was brought out again and everyone had more. To show how good he was, Trevi decided he needed a full cookie, while Mike and Taylor only had half each. Big Slick and I looked at each other, eyebrows raised, waiting to see what would happen. We didn't have to wait long. 3 hands later, all 3 of them just stopped, looking around with surprised faces like they weren't really sure what was happening. It was like a crowd at a Grateful Dead concert. 2 seconds later, it was chaos. Mike was laughing hysterically while throwing cards, chips, and cookies across the table. Taylor started breathing fast, turning an odd shade, while throwing himself to the floor to stop the world from spinning. Then there was Trevi. Trevi stood up, yelled something we couldn't understand, and bolted out the front door, tearing off his clothes and sprinting into the dark. Big Slick and I were the first to the door to see where he was headed, and it was a show worth watching. As we were standing outside looking around, I realized that even if you had seen a streaker before, you have never lived until you see a middle-aged Indian man run down the street naked. It was quite the spectacle. We knew he wasn't athletic, but that night he must have clocked a 4.8-second 40-yard dash. It was only 9:15 p.m. and he had disappeared like a stage magician. We searched the street, went across to his house to see if he was there, and he wasn't. His fiancée, however, was, and we got a serious earful about consequences. How could we do that, and where was her future husband? Big Slick and I looked at each other, and he said, "So he's not here then." I stifled a laugh as she slammed the door. By this time, Mike had joined us, but not Taylor. According to Mike, he was on the phone with his wife so she could come and save him. Yeah, that's his way. We just rolled our eyes. After about 45 minutes of searching, Trevi was found, and he was a mess. His eyes were wide, and he was hiding naked in a neighbor's bush about 2 blocks over. We had to coax him out of the bush and try to get him home, all the while waiting and watching for the police. We never did find all his clothes. That was nearly the last night the 5 of us had a home game that wasn't attended by someone's wife. Out of that, though, Big Slick and I started talking and got together to find a real game in Black Hawk or Central City. The Hold'em bug bit us both, and we shared the excitement this new endeavor would bring. Recipe for the night we became friends: Domino's Pizza. This is what our typical fare was at these games. Instructions: look up closest Domino's, order for delivery. Our favorites are the meat lovers and the Hawaiian style with jalapenos. Enjoy! Well, that is chapter 2, and I think that is where I'm going to call it for today. I thank you all for joining me, and I hope you've enjoyed the first 2 chapters. Come back next time, and there will be more. Thank you. Bye.